Hello everyone. This is part 3 of the lecture 1. We concluded the last lecture with the discussion on the revolts before 1857 and the nature of those revolts. Now we will approach a revolt of 1857. But before that, let us just establish a background with the problems that existed and contributed to the spread of the revolt in 1857. So look at those existing problems. As we have seen how East India Company was exploiting the population of India, and also we have seen various revolts prior to 1857. So these few issues were there which persisted at that time. Let us look at them one by one. Now first let us look at how Indian goods suffered in the hands of British rule. How the manufacturers of these Indian goods and handicrafts and textile industries suffered because of the policies of the British. So to understand this point, let us first understand few basic terms. First, let us understand the meaning of this term handicraft. It's made of two words. Handy simply means something made out of hands. Something made out of hands. And craft simply means something in the creation of which skill is needed. Very specific skill is needed. So item that needs skill to be made. So this is simply handicraft. So handicraft means the items which are made with hands, and the making of that item needs the person to have some skills. Now there is a need to emphasize on this word handy. This is important to note that these items were made out of hand, because as later we will see that the introduction of machines in England led to destruction of this particular art of making handicrafts. This mechanization of industries in England led to the erosion of handicraft making population in India. We will see how these handicrafts like wood carving, pottery, metalwork, paper making, and handloom textile industries, these are all affected because of East India Company and British government policies. But we will see the most affected of these were textile industries. We will see how textile industries were most affected, and specifically handloom textile. Now what are these terms? Handlooms and textile. Now textile is any cloth made out of a fiber. For example, let us say cotton. From cotton, uh, threads are made, and these threads are used to make a cloth. And then this cloth is tailored by the tailors and turned into, or dresses are made out of this. So this cloth is called textile. Handloom means a loom operated with hands. So for better clarification, let us look at this image. Now this is a fiber, cotton. You might have seen charkha, we call it charkha. This is a spinning wheel. Now here the fiber like cotton is used to make threads using this particular equipment. You can see here, this is the cotton. So a person is using the spinning wheel, and this particular part is used. This part is mainly used as a medium to rotate. So this part is rotated with hands, and the rotation is therefore transferred to this particular part. And here is where threads are made. So you can see, simple terms, this is how the person gives shape to the fiber, so the thread is made, then the thread then winds up over here. Now this thread is used in handloom to make cloths. Now you can see the thread which we obtained from the charkha are now arranged parallel to each other. This is a traditional handloom made out of wood. You can see this is made out of wood. Most of it is made out of wood. A person is needed here to run this loom. That is why it is known as handloom. You can see this thread, these threads are arranged here parallel to each other, and then on the other side cloth comes out, this kind of cloth. There may be patterns which can be made. This requires a little skill. So here you can see a woman is running the loom. She is working on it. You can see the threads here. These are threads, and even you can see the threads here. Quality is little low, sorry for that, but still for general understanding you can see the threads are still arranged here, and then this part weaves them, weaves these threads to give out this cloth. One more example you can see here, one more picture. You can see the threads arranged, and the person here is trying to weave it using this loom. So he is able to make particular patterns on it. This is how cloths are made. Then these cloths are later cut and then tailored to make dresses. Here you can see one more example, the same thing. Here you can see the intricate patterns that can also emerge out of it. It depends upon the skill of the person. So it also comes under handicraft because a particular skill is required. You can see how the weaving is done. So here we have seen how the fiber is turned into threads, that the thread is used to make textile. So I hope that I have established the meaning of these basic terms. So let us proceed further. In the last lecture we saw how East India Company used to buy Indian goods and sell them in England for profit. So some of these items were spices, raw silk. Raw silk means silk fiber, not cloth made out of silk, and cotton textiles. Indigo is a kind of dyeing agent. Indigo is a blue dye. And saltpeter. This was used to make gunpowder. These few items were so much in demand in England, but out of these it was cotton textile which was very special. This was in great demand in England, and these cotton textiles and the dresses made out of them were loved by British population. It became a major fashion demand in 17th century in England. So at this time, East India Company used to buy Indian cotton textiles and sell them in England, with which East India Company earned huge profit. And remember how they had exclusive rights to trade in India. So they had earned huge profit because of this kind of monopoly. This created a big problem in England, because what was happening from India, these cotton textiles which were in great demand were going to England. They were loved by people in great demand. So the local manufacturers of wool and silk textiles, they were not able to compete with Indian cotton textiles. This problem became so serious that East India Company's headquarters in England, East India Company's headquarters in England were being attacked by the English population. This was because the East India Company was the one who was taking these cotton textiles to England. So the local manufacturers of silk and wool textiles, they were incurring losses because the demand of these silk and wool textiles reduced. So the local population started attacking East India Company's headquarters. There were many protests in England. So because of this reason, the Parliament of England was having so much pressure from their local textile manufacturers. And because of this pressure, and with the aim to protect these manufacturers of silk and wool textiles, the English Parliament brought two acts, very famously called Calico Acts. There were two acts. One was in 1700 and other was in 1721. The names are lengthier, so we don't need to go into detail. Combinedly, these acts were called Calico Acts. Now, Calico, this term comes from Calicut. So, Calicut, which is in Kerala today, was famous for a kind of cotton textile which was known as Calico because of the name Calicut. So the fiber, so the textile coming out of Calicut, cotton textile, was known as Calico. Now this particular Calico fabric is unbleached cotton textile and has a very dull color. Let me show you. Now this is Calico. You can see the texture is rough. It is unbleached. It is rough texture, a little dull color, dull in color. And this was so much in demand in England. Also the polished version of it. So you can see this is Calico, rough texture. And now this is bleached Calico. This is unbleached and this is bleached. So it is simply made out of cotton threads. So when unbleached, it has a very dull color. It hasn't been polished or simply isn't refined enough. And this is bleached. You can see the change in the color and you can see a little polish is there, more refined texture. And after bleaching and after treating it with starch and resin, you get a little shiny texture. And also patterns can be made. You can see the patterns. This is polished and more refined, a shined, or also called glazed calico. The term for this glazed calico, the kind of textile, is cints. Now this cints was used to make dresses and they used to have particular shine. Now you can see the material here is having shine, very different from unbleached. You can see the vibrant and bright colors. This material since, and this was the fashion in Britain at those times. These dresses were in high demand. People used to love these dresses. You can see the vibrant color and the intricate detail and patterns which can be formed on these clothes. So these are British clothes. As you can see, this a man's cloth and a woman's. You can still see. You can see a cotton here, a cotton flower, and the cints made out of this cotton. So these clothes were in very high demand in England. And not only dresses, but carpets and bed sheets and blankets, all of them were made out of this cints material. So you can pause the video and go through it, made out of cints. And in response to this demand of Calico, or since two acts were brought, these were Calico acts. Why was the name Calico? Because these acts were brought as a reaction to the prevailing situation, to counter the overwhelming demand of Indian calico or since, because of which local textile manufacturers were suffering. Now these both acts aimed at prohibition of import of any cotton. So prohibition of import on any cotton from India, any cotton textile, more specifically from India. Import where? Import in England. So the act prohibited that no cotton textile from India could be imported to England. There was an exception of raw cotton. Except raw cotton. Now this we have seen, this is the raw cotton fiber. This fiber was exempted to be imported. Now this exception was given so that the local textile industry in England, so England manufacturers could use this raw cotton to make cotton textile. So you can see the whole idea was to stop this import of Indian textile, cotton textile, instead of which they wanted to bring raw cotton from India and import it to England so that England manufacturers could make cotton textile and sell it in England's market. So what will happen here? The Indian manufacturers who are making textile and then exporting it to England and were able to sell it there, they were left with no option. As we have seen, the raw cotton is first turned into thread and then into textile, and these textile manufacturers were exporting the textile in England. Now this work of turning the raw cotton into textile was taken over by the English textile manufacturers. So England markets were now dominated by English manufacturers. So this prohibition was the first hit to Indian textile industry. English textile manufacturers took control of the market. They took control of their market and their cotton textile began to compete with Indian textiles. Which means over time English textiles or English textile industry became strong enough to compete with Indian textiles. And because East India Company before could have earned profit, and in fact they were earning profit by selling Indian cotton textiles to Britain, but the acts prohibited that. So East India Company started to export this raw cotton into England for these manufacturers, because the exception was only given for raw cotton. So instead of bringing Indian textile to England, they started bringing raw cotton. And apart from Calico Acts, one more advancement happened, which is mechanization in England. Mechanization. As we have seen in India, handlooms were used to convert raw fiber or raw cotton into textiles. Now in 17th-18th century was the start of mechanization in England, which means the arrival of machines, motorized machines. And we see the invention of motorized handloom, where the person didn't have to ride or didn't have to operate the handloom. Instead, he has to just organize the threads and the machine will do its job. So this is a difference. Here the handloom is made of wood. You can see a person is needed here, and here this is mechanized handloom, the mechanized loom. Mechanized loom. No person is needed. You can see side by side so many looms are there operating. There is no person needed. Only the threads are delivered or served to the machine, and the cloth comes out. Because of this mechanization, English textile manufacturers, they were able to now make more textile because they are not hiring humans. So the machines are doing, the motors are doing the work. The motors are running the machine, and therefore the machines are faster. They don't get tired. So the manufacturing process is faster. And also they don't need to hire humans and give them salary. So now the demand of those human employees is less, and also the price has came down. So these are cheaper. It is cheaper to run mechanized loom. So both the mechanization and Calico Acts led to the English textile manufacturers being able to stand up or even dominate the textile market. And after the mechanization and the strengthening of the local English textile manufacturers, these Calico Acts were repealed. They were repealed around 1774. So this gave enough time to manufacturers to English textile manufacturers to be able to establish their hold on the market, and now they are able to not only compete but to dominate market. They have further advantages. They have the advantage of machine which can produce the same textile more faster and cheaper. Now Indian handicrafts were no match against the machine made cotton textile because of mechanization and because of the good hold that English textile manufacturers gained till this point. Now, because of this ban on Indian textiles until 1774, so till 1774, East India Company started to focus mainly on raw cotton because they had only option to import raw cotton from India to England. And because of this, they started to redirect most of the raw cotton supply from Indian market. So this raw cotton which were needed by the local Indian textile manufacturers. Now majority of this was redirected. They were redirected to England for the use of their manufacturers, their textile manufacturers. Now because of this shortage of raw cotton for textile manufacturers in India, they were incurring losses. This was second hit. First hit was that their export to England was obstructed, and second hit was in their own local market in India, they were not able to find raw cotton because most of it was redirected toward England, and this was done by East India Company. Now one more thing, that after 1813, when a Charter Act was passed, so we say Charter Act of 1813 was passed. Under it, the control of Indian territories was taken over by British government. British government took over the control from East India Company. So East India Company was no more administering the Indian territories. Now the control was taken over by British government. This happened in 1813. So till 1774, this was the case when raw cotton was only an exception. Everything made out of cotton, like the textile, was banned to be imported from India to England. But after 1774, Calico Acts were repealed. So what happened that in 1813 the British government started imposing tariffs on the import of Indian textiles to England. So as we have seen, from India till 1774, only raw cotton was going out to England, and after 1774 textiles were permitted. So textile also used to be exported now after 1774. After 1774. Now we have seen the manufacturers already had two advantages, which is mechanization, and they have well established, or they are well established in the market. And the textile industries in India were not able to get enough hold on their own raw cotton. Apart from that, now there was tariffs, which means on any export of any textile from India to England, there was a tariff of up to 15%, which is a very high tariff. At this point, Indian textile industry is not mechanized. England's textile industries are mechanized. They can produce cheaper, they can produce faster. And when Indian textile reaches England with 15% tariff, so the prices are so high that nobody would want to buy Indian textile in England. So even after the abolition of Calico Acts in 1774, the condition after that was that Indian textile manufacturers were not able to compete in this export business. And not only that, the import of these textiles, which were made by English manufacturers, were allowed to be imported into India duty free, which means tariff was 0% tariff. So you can see the Indian textile manufacturers are not able to compete in exports, not able to compete in their own markets, own local markets, because there is now a supply of this duty free, mechanized and cheaper textiles, which are now dominating their own markets. Which means here Indian textile manufacturers have no cotton as supply, export have high tariff, they have to compete with mechanized textiles, and the import of these mechanized textiles are having zero tariff. So you can see the textile manufacturers in India had no chance of survival against these conditions and these policies of British government. And because of this, many manufacturers and handloom workers turned towards agriculture. So these manufacturers, these workers, they turned towards agriculture. So because of this, because of a huge population turning towards the agriculture, there started to be pressure on the agricultural land, because the agricultural land is limited. The population, a sudden change in the dependence of majority of population from their usual occupation to agriculture brings a lot of pressure on agricultural land. So obviously, when there are more people, less land, this means reduction or limitation of options for these workers. Now these agricultural lands have to provide for income for all these people, all this population which is shifting from manufacturing industries, textile industries, handicrafts towards agriculture. So this agricultural land, which was already giving less income, to farmers. Now a whole lot of population is going to shift into agriculture with the limited land. So in this condition, the salary of laborers reduces because laborers are more in number. Because they are more in number, the demand is low. And when the demand is low, the salary comes down. Laborers are more, salary of laborers goes down. Apart from that, the English used to impose high taxes on farmers. So because of these high taxes, there used to be an additional burden on the farmers who were already suffering from tyrannical and cruel policies of English, like dual system of government. And because of high taxes, the farmers used to have burden if they are not able to pay tax, or if for some reason the crop fails and they have to still pay tax, they used to turn to money lenders for loans. They used to take loans, borrow money from money lenders. The collateral was their land. They used to keep land as a collateral in the hands of money lenders and take loans to pay the tax and to have money for their own survival. And whenever the farmers were not able to repay these loans, the money lenders used to take the lands from the farmers. So farmers used to have no money, and now no land, because the money lender has taken the land from the farmer. So loss of land, loss of livelihood. And apart from that, there was the issue of corruption among police. There was huge corruption because kings and rulers were having less power, and the British was having whole authority, and they didn't care about the administration or the social welfare. So there was rampant corruption among the police, the lower courts, the petty officials, revenue officials, and this made the common people's life miserable. Similarly, there was British policies of Paramountcy, Subsidiary alliance, and Doctrine of Lapse. Now let us discuss about these three policies. As we have already seen that in Battle of Buxar, East India Company took control of Bengal first, and because of Mughal Emperor, because he was defeated along with the Nawab of Awadh and Nawab of Bengal, East India Company established themselves as the most powerful and dominating force in India. So in India, now East India Company, because they defeated everyone, they started to assert their powers. So became dominating. And because of the battles like Battle of Buxar, gave these battles gave confidence to the East India Company, and they started to expand their influence. First, they were having stronghold in Bengal. They were having a stronghold in Madras. And after defeating the emperor, they wanted to expand this influence or their domination to the rest of the unoccupied territory. So, pursuing this policy, they defeated Tipu Sultan. After Battle of Buxar, Tipu Sultan, and before that Hyder Ali was defeated. Then Tipu Sultan was defeated in 1799, and they took control of Mysore. So they took control of Mysore after defeating Tipu Sultan. In 1818, they defeated the last Peshwa, the last Maratha ruler, and it ended the Maratha rule. So the territories under the Marathas now came under the control of British. These were Pune and Mandsaur and Gwalior. So you can see slowly they are trying to take over more and more territories. You can see the British policy After British took over from East India Company in 1813 and even little before that, the policy is changing, or their intent is changing from business or trade towards establishment of an empire. So till 1813 East India Company fought, and after 1813 British government took charge and they fought to take over more and more territory. Now around this time British adopted the policy of British Paramountcy. So British Paramountcy. As we have established, they wanted to now take control of all of the India. So they wanted to assert themselves as most powerful or paramount, mean supreme. In simple term, paramount means supreme. They wanted to establish themselves as the supreme power in India. So from that becomes paramountcy. So this policy of British paramountcy is pursued by the British to take control of all of the India and subdue each and every ruler inside India under British. They wanted every ruler, every kingdom to accept the suzerainty or the dominance of British power. Now there are two ways to do it, to establish the suzerainty. One is to fight, or one is war. The second is diplomacy. We will see how these are reasonable and efficient in different situations. Diplomacy means treaties and agreements or alliances. And as we have seen, Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar, and taking over Mysore, and taking over Bengal, taking over Mandsaur, Gwalior, Pune. This is following the policy of British paramountcy using war. They also fought and took over Punjab. They took over Punjab in 1849. So this is one way. The war is one way to take over India and establish their superiority. And the other way was to diplomatically first subdue the king and then annex their territories. And this was diplomacy. Now how did they do it? So under diplomacy, there were two main ways or two main sub policies. These were subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse. Now before going into these policies, we must first look at why was diplomacy preferred than going to war and defeat the rulers and then establish the superiority over other rulers and their kingdoms. The reasons are simple. War is costly. When you wage war, you have to sacrifice your soldiers. You have to feed the soldiers. You need stock, you need weapons, you need expenses, you need horse, and it is risky. So there is expense, and war is unpredictable. Even after spending money, even after sacrificing your soldiers, it is not always guaranteed that you will win the war. War is always unpredictable. Now, diplomacy is inexpensive, or we must say less expensive. Diplomacy is also less chaotic or less unpredictable. Because diplomacy is talks and agreements, takes time, and you have enough time to come up with different strategies. There is a huge potential to be able to explore different possibilities. So also British used to orchestrate the reason to go to war with a ruler. They used to find the reasons to fight a war, to also gather support from other rulers. So they used to find reasons so that they can make two rulers fight against each other, and they can also find a common reason to either help a ruler or to fight against him. Now, why was this so much important to find a reason? It was very important because there was a risk that if British attacked some king or some ruler without any reason, they might be looked upon as tyrants or just cruel enemy of all. So in such condition, there was a huge chance that the opposition or the enemies can all gather against the British, and then British would have to fight against a union of king instead of one king. So the British did not want to go to these extreme extent, which is why they always found or tried to orchestrate a reason so that to show other rulers that it was important for them to go to war. And they also used to find such a reason which would also convince other rulers that there lies an interest for other rulers to support British. So there is a need for reason to go to war. A reason is needed, and they can't always find a reason to go to war. So whenever they couldn't find a reason to fight, they prefer diplomacy. So there are so many advantages of this approach. So let us look at subsidiary alliance first. Now the plan under this particular policy, the policy means some person's or somebody's disposition or behavior or perspective towards something or some other person. So the plan was to make alliance with the rulers and ask them to accept British sovereignty or superiority. Now the ally state or ruler who accepted this sovereignty was compelled to accept the permanent stationing of a British force inside the territory of the ruler. So this is ruler who has been turned into an ally. Alliance has been set up. Now he is required to allow stationing of British force inside his own territory, and the ruler has to pay for the maintenance of this force. So he has to pay for the maintenance. The ruler has to allow a British force inside his territory and also has to pay for it. And along with that, the ruler had to also agree with the posting of a British agent in his court. So let us say in the king's court, a British agent had to be stationed or had to be posted. Now, posted for what? To check that the ruler could not go to war or negotiate with any Indian ruler, any other Indian ruler, without the advice of the Governor General. Now, who is Governor General? This was the time when the Governor of Bengal was made superior to the other governors of Madras and Bombay. So, the Bengal governor was given the post of Governor General. He was superior to the other governors in India. So the king has to take advice or had to consider or had to discuss with Governor General. Without his permission, without the permission of Governor General, the king cannot go to war or negotiate with any other Indian ruler. And to check whether this is being followed or not, this person who is the agent of British agent had to be posted in the court, and he also checks whether the British force is being maintained properly. Now the question is, why would an independent ruler accept these terms or even accept British suzerainty? So what used to happen is that Indian rulers were often in war with their neighboring Indian rulers. So if a ruler is in war with the neighboring rulers or any of them, he needed help. because no number is greater or no number is smaller in army. You always need more men to fight. And we have seen British gathered enough army by recruiting Indian soldiers, Indian sepoys. So the East India Company and later the British government used to help these rulers fight war and win against the neighboring rulers. And remember that I presented an example that in Battle of Plassey, around 3,000 soldiers of East India Company were able to defeat an army of 50,000. And this was because they were so advanced. The soldiers were loaded with modern weapons and were well trained in combat under European officers or British officers. So these numbers were impressive for any king or any ruler who is in midst of the war with another ruler. So these rulers naturally used to ask the help of East India Company or British force, or whenever the British force itself or the British or East India Company used to present themselves to the ruler and offer a helping hand, it was very hard to reject this offer. And in return of this offer, East India Company used to ask the ruler to sign this agreement or this treaty of subsidiary alliance. And apart from that, every ruler who used to sign subsidiary alliance was given protection under British. The British would defend these rulers from any threat. Any outside threat would be defended by the British. So the ruler and his kingdom is safe. The British force is stationed. The British will take care of all the threat. And they also used to not interfere in any internal matter. And because of these terms, it was very attractive offer that the ruler will be able to win the war and he is getting a guarantee of protection of his territories from later threats. The East India Company force and the British force and their power is impressive. Any ruler would like to sign a treaty of subsidiary alliance, and that is what happened. British force stationed inside ruler's territory. An agent of British posted in the ruler's court. Ruler has to maintain the British army, the British force, which has been stationed inside the ruler's territory. The ruler has no freedom in external affairs, external matters, and also that the British won't interfere in internal matters. Won't interfere internal matters. And all of the threat is dealt by British. So these were the main features of subsidiary alliance. And in this way, the ruler becomes, or the territory of ruler becomes a subsidiary of the British Empire. Now what is subsidiary? It is like a subsidiary company of the bigger company, which means a branch. In the same way, the ruler's territory or the ruler himself was the extension of the British power, or in simple way, he was the part of this bigger British Empire, and that is why his kingdom was subsidiary, and this was disguised as alliance treaty. That is why the name is subsidiary alliance. Now, as we have seen that the force which has been stationed has to be maintained by the ruler. Now, in return of this protection, the ruler also had to pay a fees. Fees paid to British, because they are the one who is protecting the ruler. And this fees, which is protection fees, kind of protection fees, was very high. And whenever the ruler was not able to pay this fees, he was asked to give a little part of his territory to the British. So, of the whole territory, when he is not the ruler is not able to pay the fees, a little territory is given to British instead of the payment. Now this is annexation, taking over part by part, bit by bit. So this is bit by bit annexation. This was the main aim. The main aim was the annexation. So first we have seen going to war is one kind of method to annex or take control of the territory. Now this is diplomatically taking control of a territory bit by bit. You can see the expense is very less. Instead, the British are making profit out of their territories. You will see there are so many kings who readily accepted this suzerainty because they just wanted to neutralize the threat from the neighbor rulers. So the British didn't even have to fight a war. British came with an offer that we will neutralize all the threats that you are having. You will be safer under our protection. You have to just sign the subsidiary alliance. And the kings readily accepted it. And whenever they were not able to pay the protection fees, they had to cede a part of territory. So bit by bit, the British were taking over these territories under the rulers. Now the second is Doctrine of Lapse. Now any ruler who has signed subsidiary alliance, he was asked, every ruler, he was asked to sign an agreement that whenever the ruler has adopted son to succeed him, he doesn't have his own son, he has adopted a son to succeed. So ruler has adopted son. Then the adopted son can only inherit ruler's private property. So only private property goes to the adopted son. In case the ruler dies, if ruler died, the adopted son can get only the private property of the father or of the ruler. But the throne, all of his territory, all of his kingdom will go to British government. So in this way, the British are taking the entire territory of the ruler. Here it was bit by bit, now here it is entire territory. So this is diplomacy, more effective, more efficient, and that is why this policy of Doctrine of Lapse became so infamous. Now that we have seen British Paramountcy, Subsidiary Alliance, Doctrine of Lapse, we'll get to threat to religion. In Charter Act of 1813, Charter Act, the British government, when they took control of the territories in India, which were first occupied by East India Company, they permitted Christian missionaries to enter India. They were asked to carry out educational activities. They were asked to impart secular ideas or Christian ideas into the minds of Indians through education and missionary activities. So they were using missions and education. And this was known or this was perceived as a threat to the Indian Muslims and Hindus, and specifically their religions. And after this, now let us look at the revolt of 1857. Now we know that British were ruling major parts of India since 1764 after the Battle of Buxar. They were only established in Bengal. Slowly they made a good foothold. They were already having a foothold in Madras. They spread their foothold. They took over many territories in this period between 1764 and 1857. And we have already talked about how they used to recruit soldiers from India. So as under other kings or rulers, Indians served in army. The same happened. Even when the foreign rulers like Mughals came to India, they brought with themselves considerable Mughal army. And that Mughal army also settled in India. And the Hindus also used to get recruited in the foreign army or the army of the foreign rulers who invaded India, who started ruling India. And over 200, 300 years, these people became Indians who came with the Mughals or Turks to India. These people assimilated or became a part of India. So you can see the the people here started serving British in the similar way. So these soldiers who were also called sepoys. Now around 1824, these sepoys or Indian soldiers under East India Company were mainly or in majority mostly upper caste Hindus, Brahmins and Kshatriyas, and they belong to northwestern province and Awadh mostly. Now, British and Indian sepoys used to have conflicts related to religious practices. Indian sepoys and East India Company used to have conflicts. There are few things that Hindus are prohibited to do according to their religion. But British didn't used to consider this. They demanded the sepoys that you stay loyal to the company and follow the orders. Initially, the conflicts were even resolved, and the demands of these sepoys were considered and even accepted. The East India Company used to make necessary changes in the service to accommodate these sepoys because they needed them. East India Company needed these soldiers. But this could only happen until the sepoys had to serve inside the territory of India. As soon as they were deployed outside the Indian territory, these considerations which East India Company was making was not possible. It was not possible to cater to these demands of the sepoys. Let us take an example that in 47th Regiment in Barakpur, they were ordered to go to Burma. Today it is called Myanmar. So they were ordered to go to Burma. Now there is a thing that to religious Hindus at that time, crossing of the sea meant loss of caste. They couldn't cross sea. So the Hindus were not supposed to cross the sea under their religious practices. The sepoys therefore refused to follow the orders. They refused to go to Burma. The whole Barakpur regiment was disbanded or they were dismissed from the service. There were few leaders who led this refusal to follow orders. These leaders were hanged by East India Company. In 1840s, when the British were fighting Afghan war, the soldiers had to walk through the harsh mountain ranges and had to eat whatever they found to survive. From India to Afghanistan, you have to walk, and between in India and Afghanistan, there are mountain ranges, many mountain ranges. So if there are mountain ranges between India and Afghanistan, Indian soldiers have to cross these mountains, have to walk for many days. It is harsh climate. There are not enough forest, and towards the Afghanistan, it is almost dry. So they had to walk through these harsh mountain ranges and had to eat whatever they could find in order to survive. So it is impossible in this condition that they could follow the prohibitions or they could follow their religious practices. So because of that, they were not welcomed back to their caste. The people in their caste disowned them or threw them out of their caste. The condition was such severe that even if your rank under the company or you were having enough salary, even if your salary was high, these elements of society like religion and caste were more prominent, because at last you have to go back to your home, you have to return to your home, you have to live with them, you have to live among the same caste. And at that time, this caste hierarchy was very rigid. So because of this, the army or the soldiers who were recruited under East India Company, they were disowned, thrown out of the caste. Similarly, in 1857, around 1857, at this time in 1857, this infantry, they refused to use new rifles which were introduced into East India Company's army. What used to happen? The cartridges which are used in the gun. So let us look what were greased cartridges. Cartridges means both the gunpowder and the bullet. Here, this is the bullet, this is the gunpowder. You can see. So what used to happen that the soldiers were required to bite this part off using their mouth. Why? Because this paper was greased, and during the war you may not have something sharp with you like a knife, or it is not efficient to use a tool while you are loading each cartridge individually during the war. What used to happen, once you fire the weapon, you had to load with the same procedure again and again. They didn't used to have magazines at that time, and these were the new rifles. So they had to bite this with their mouth using their teeth and then load it. And if you want more idea, you can watch a YouTube video. And I think there is a scene in the movie Mangal Pandey where they exactly show how these are loaded. If you have a confusion, now there used to be a kind of grease in the cartridges which was used. This grease was used for the protection from moisture and humidity. And this grease was made of beef and pig fat. Beef and pig fat. So it was a huge thing for Hindus and Muslims. So because of this infantry at Berhampur refused to use these new rifles. 34th Native Infantry went a step ahead. There was a young sepoy who fired at the sergeant major because of these cartridges. This young man's name was Mangal Pandey. He was from 34th Native Infantry. You might have heard the name Mangal Pandey. Mangal Pandey was executed because of this. Because he fired at sergeant, he was executed. And his whole regiment was disbanded. So many similar reports were there. Many similar rumors spread. Although they were rumors, maybe they were not. But rumors spread that bone dust was being added in atta, wheat flour. And also there were rumors that under the East India Company, conversions were performed. So there was religious tension. The situation developed in many regiments. So such other causes were there, rumors were there, some reports were there. So religious tension was simmering up. So because of all these events, there was a situation developing across the country in different regiments. So one day, a group of sepoys killed many European officers who were their superiors. So the sepoys killed seniors, and the next day they, with their group, marched towards Delhi to Red Fort. These sepoys were from Meerut. On the way, they fought many officers. They even fought officers near the Red Fort. And seeing this, a huge crowd joined them. This crowd got excited seeing them, seeing the sepoys fight against the British. As we have already discussed, farmers, the common people, were already aggrieved. They were having pain and they were living a miserable life. They got excited seeing these sepoys fight against the Britishers, and they followed these sepoys. So when these sepoys reached Delhi, local soldiers of Delhi also joined them. So local soldiers joined them. These soldiers killed their own superior officers, European officers, and took control of the city. These sepoys took control of the city, took control of Delhi. Now what happened is that Mughal emperor at this time was Bahadur Shah Zafar. He was the Mughal emperor at this time. As we have discussed, this Mughal emperor, these all Mughal emperors, because of the defeat in Battle of Buxar, they were merely a puppet now. They were powerless. They were not having force of their own. And you can see that the local Delhi soldiers, they were working under, or they were recruited under the East India Company. Their superiors were Europeans, which is why they killed these European officers and took control of the city, joined the sepoys from Meerut. So Bahadur Shah Zafar was weak and powerless. So when the sepoys took control of the city, they proclaimed Bahadur Shah Zafar as the Emperor of India. These sepoys, this crowd, after getting into Red Fort, they proclaimed or they announced Bahadur Shah Zafar as the Emperor of India. Now why did they do this? They wanted to fight under a banner. They wanted to fight Britishers under a king, under a ruler, and they chose Bahadur Shah Zafar as the Emperor of India. Because for last 200 and 300 years, the Mughal emperors in India were the sign of authority. They were the sign of king. They took care of the public here. They ruled over various territories. So in the minds of people, the Emperor of India were still Mughals. And as we have discussed, that people used to consider the king who were actually from the royal family. So in 2-3 centuries, under the Mughal rule, an impression developed in the minds of people that subconsciously they accepted Mughals as the rulers. So when this happened, when this proclamation happened, the simple mutiny means betrayal, army which betrayed their superiors, which betrayed East India Company, this mutiny turned into a full-blown war against British. Now the sepoys declared a war, but Bahadur Shah Zafar was still hesitant. But later he took command and wrote letters and proclamations. Later he took command, he agreed that he will lead this war and act as a king and help the sepoys win the war against the British. So what he did, he started sending proclamations and letters to different kings. Proclamations mean declarations, announcements. So the proclamations and letters were to unite all the kings and rulers, and also to unite all the people and soldiers of all the state, and to ask them to fight and replace the British. After this proclamation, the revolt spread quickly to different areas. It spread to Awadh, Rohilkhand, which is Western UP. Western UP. This area of Western UP is Rohilkhand. Ganga, Yamuna, Doab. Doab means the land between two rivers, two confluencing or converging rivers. These areas were the first to get affected. It spread here. The revolt quickly spread to these areas. This also resulted in the uprising of people, the civil uprising, the common people, the common masses like farmers, small zamindars, traders, artisans, laborers, the priests. They got motivated by the rebellion and the declaration by this Mughal emperor. What did they do? They burnt the records of many moneylenders. As we have seen, the moneylenders used to take the land when farmers were not able to pay back the loan. Burnt records of moneylenders. They attacked courts because of the corruption. The revenue offices and police stations were burnt because of high taxation, the corrupt practices of police. Police stations were burnt. The rebellion spread in other parts of the country within a month. Different rulers and leaders took command of this revolt in different regions. So, like for example, in Delhi, the command of army was taken by General Bakht Khan. He took the command of the army. He became the commander in chief in Delhi under Bahadur Shah Zafar. In Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal took the command of army. In Bareilly, Khan Bahadur. In Bihar, Kunwar Singh. He was a zamindar. In Jhansi, Lakshmi Bai. And Tatya Tope. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib. These were very prominent leaders of the revolt at that time. You might have heard the names of most of these, but there were many who didn't help, and in fact they helped British, like the Sindhyas. The Sindhya didn't help. They didn't become the part of the revolt. They helped British. Similarly, most of the rulers money lenders, big zamindars. Money lenders because people were burning the records. Money lenders were profiting under the British. Similarly, big zamindars who were making profit, who were not getting affected by this new East India Company's regime, and such high class people who were making profit, they did not participate. So the kings, such as Sindhia of Gwalior, Holkar of Indore, rulers of Patiala, Sindh, Sikh chiefs, and Maharaja of Kashmir also didn't participate. So as a result, the revolt was suppressed by the British. Because you see, there were many kings, many zamindars, big zamindars, who were not a part. And it is said that only, and it is also said that almost 1/10 of the population of India was participating in this revolt. What happened as a result is that within 2-3 months, as a result, within 2-3 months, British captured Delhi. Bahadur Shah Zafar was put in prison and sent to Rangoon. Bahadur Shah Zafar was imprisoned. Within 2 to 3 months. This was in 1857. He died in prison in 1862. He died in 1862 in prison. Princes, royal princes, who were from the royal family, who were involved in revolt, were shot point blank by a British lieutenant. And when this central authority or central power or central figure fell, slowly, one by one, all the prominent leaders who fought, they all fell. They all lost. And the revolt disappeared. So at last, the protest disappeared. Now you see, different historians have different opinions about this revolt. But something which is very common, you can see, that every historian will agree upon is that people stood for themselves. People stood for themselves, they sacrificed their lives. They sacrificed their lives. They fought for different causes. Now also every section was having its own cause to fight. Still different causes. Among different sections. And religion was one of the factor which was different from the protests that we saw before 1857, the smaller protests. They were not religious. But here we see a religious color arising. Religion was a factor. But even though when religion was a factor, we see Hindu-Muslim unity. Hindu-Muslim unity. It came from a threat, a common threat. They wanted to fight a common root of all of their problems, which was East India Company. Now, if you want to understand the importance of this religion as a factor in this revolt, let us see what were the proclamations made by Bahadur Shah Zafar. We will look at very important points. He says that in this age, the people of Hindustan both Hindus and Mohammedans are being ruined under the tyranny and oppression of the treacherous and infidel treacherous English. It is therefore the duty of all the wealthy people of India, especially of those who have any sort of connection with any of the Mohammedan royal families. Now, at this time, Bahadur Shah Zafar is asking the Muslims from royal families to participate in this war. He is not only asking the royal families, but he is also asking the Hindus. Now, he also says that those wealthy people who have any sort of connection with any Mohammedan royal families who is a Muslim and who is considered the pastor and masters of their people, which means they rule the people there. Bahadur Shah Zafar wants these people to keep their lives at stake and property for the well-being of public. And he further says that he, who is the grandson of Abdul Muzaffar Sirajuddin Bahadur Shah Ghazi, King of India, he calls himself the King of India, who wants to throw out the infidels residing in eastern part of the country. He is calling infidels the East India Company, the British, who are mostly in power in eastern part of the country. He wants to liberate and protect the poor, the helpless people who are groaning, who are crying under the iron rule of East India Company. By whom? By what? By the aid of Mujahideens or religious fanatics. He wants to follow the standard of Muhammad and persuade the Orthodox Hindus. He also wants to convince the Hindus who had been subject of his ancestors, which means who were ruled by the ancestors of Bahadur Shah Zafar and who are still accessories to the destruction of English, which means they are still a part, a major weapon against the British. They are still a part to fight the war against the British. They want the Hindus to follow the standard of Mahavir, to follow the path of Mahavir and help this revolt to succeed and throw the British out of this country. Bahadur Shah Zafar is using religion and its tenets to convince the masses, which proves the importance of religion in the revolt. He also asks the parties to participate in common cause, even them who have no means to provide for themselves, who don't have food, those who don't have resources. He ensures them that they will receive daily subsistence from him, daily needs, and be it known to all that the ancient works of both Hindus and the Mohammedans, the writing of miracle workers, the calculations of astrologers, pundits, and rammals, all agree asserting that the English will no longer have any footing in India or elsewhere, which means he is still trying to convince people on the basis of religious texts. He is still focused on the calculation of astrologers, the pundits, the ramals, the writings of the miracle workers. This is how he is convincing the population. So, reading this proclamation, you can get that people didn't have an idea to change the form or the system of rule which was in existence. Religion was a big part of this revolt, or at least it was given that color by the rulers. Even when we see the proclamation of Khan Bahadur, Nawab of Bareilly, he considers English as a threat to all the religions. He says the English are people who overthrow all religions. He asks people to understand that with the object of destroying the religions of Hindustan, East India Company have for a long time been causing books to be written and circulated through the country by the hands of clergymen and exercising their authority, which means they are trying to change the text. They are trying to publish books which are written by the clergy and they have also brought numbers of preachers, numbers of people to spread Christianity or their own tenets. Accordingly, they now ordered the Brahmins and other of the armies to buy cartridges in making up of which fat has been used, the same which we have already studied, that fat was used to bite the cartridges. He further says that the Muslim soldiers perceived that by this expedient the religion of the Brahmins and Hindus only was in danger, but nevertheless they also refused to bite them. He says that Hindus and Muslim both were threatened. The religion of both was in jeopardy, so they both refused to bite them. So he calls the Hindus by their faith in Gangas, Tulsi, like Tulsidas and Saligram, and he also calls the Muslims by the belief in God and Quran, that these English are common enemy of both, that you should unite, considering their slaughter extremely expedient, extremely important, and should happen soon. And by only doing this will the lives and faith of both be saved. So you can see the proclamations themselves have a religious color. Let us look at why it was so much important to discuss this revolt. Here we see a religious unity, and the people fought for basic needs together. Even though majority of sepoys were Hindus, they wanted Bahadur Shah, Zafar, as emperor. So there was religious unity there. But there is one more thing that you have to see, that people still sought a king. They still found the shelter of a king. The idea of the need of a king is not going away. And that is one of the reasons that as soon as kings and leaders fell or died or lost the revolt disappeared. What happened is people didn't know what to do now. They had no plans, no plan. The hope is lost because they hoped that there would be a king who would direct, coordinate, and organize everything for a war to be fought. But as soon as the king lost, the revolt got weaker. People were not fighting because they had a plan in their own mind. They wanted something. No, they looked at king. They wanted king to decide what to do. And even if we can see, the king was chosen by soldiers, the sepoys, but he was not chosen by the civilians. Civilians had no role, no participation. That is why you see that after the proclamation by Bahadur Shah Zafar, different kings got motivated and the common people under them got strength. People didn't demand their kings to protest. We have seen the proclamation. The letters were sent to different kings, and as soon as proclamations were there, so many prominent leaders arose, and because of which the soldiers, the people under them, they got motivated. They also started revolting. It was not people who gave the ideas or who forced their kings to fight against the Britishers. It was the king. It was the sepoys, then the king. And the king, the Bahadur Shah Zafar, ordered or requested the kings, other kings, to fight. And therefore, the people got motivated under the kings. We have to go a long way to see the people gathering together without the help of a king, and after gathering together, they are uniting under one shelter, under one umbrella, and trying to fight for one cause, and pressuring the king or the leader to fight for something. It is not happening right now. It is not the people's cause which is getting reflected among the leaders. It is the opposite. The kings, the leaders are the one who are directing. And even during the protest and revolt before 1857, people didn't question the king, as we have seen. They fought money lenders, they fought small corrupt officers, police, British factory were attacked, but they never questioned the king. They never questioned that if the king is not able to protect them or their interest, why is king still sitting as a king? They never said to kings to leave the chair of the king. No question to king. They didn't have any idea that they can choose their ruler or they can have some right to have a king who would work in interest of the society. But still you see, even if they had no idea or no motivation to fight or search for a different cause, they still became stronger. We see the evolution of Indian society, which from not having any power, they were not able to fight. They were having no fighting spirit against any authority in medieval times. They slowly gathered to fight against whom? They gathered the strength to fight against the biggest European power. Of that time. Although they lost, but they were able to pose a challenge. Although the revolt was led by the sepoys, but the participation of common people was more. I will give you an example that in Awadh during the revolt, 1,50,000 people died fighting the British. These were the people who were killed. They fought the East India Company and they died. Now, out of these 1,50,000, almost around 1 lakh were civilians. These were not soldiers, these were civilians who died. So, what is happening over the time from ancient to medieval to under colonial rule? The masses are gathering strength. Now they are able to fight, they are sacrificing themselves and in big numbers. Even though they lost, but still they learn to protest. Now, for betterment, they need two things. For betterment, after all of this, they need two things. They need strength and they need guidance or direction. Now, strength they already got. We have seen. They proved their strength, but there was no guidance. There was no organization centrally. Even if you see from Delhi, there was no central organization. Everyone was fighting in their own land. Bahadur Shah Zafar urged all the kings to fight. They were fighting alone. Each king was fighting within his own kingdom. No medium established. There was no connection established where directions could be given to different rebelling groups or different fighting kings. They had no plan on how to fight with coordination. These different kings, they were not able to coordinate with each other or group together to fight British. They were all distributed, spread. They were not able to group all of their armies together. The sepoys revolted, the masses followed, the people followed the sepoys. There was proclamations, the kings fought, masses followed. Where they didn't have anyone to follow, they attacked anything which was British. But defeating British was a big task. It couldn't be done in this way. And to do something big, common masses were not enough organized. The only requirement was someone who could organize them, who could organize them, give this strength a direction, and who could show them when to fight, when to fight, how to fight, and the most important, to fight for what, which we will discuss in the next part of the lecture. Now that we have established good base till Revolt of 1857, we'll be able to proceed with the next section, where we will learn about so many terms like equality, republic, democracy, fraternity, and these ideas, and how they reached the prominent leaders of the freedom struggle. So see you in part 3. Thank you.